Morena koutou, everyone, and welcome. Members, if you can get yourself organised for the morning, that would be fantastic, and welcome along to our Finance Committee meeting for May. Welcome to residents who are watching us live, and to others who might catch up with this through our video replays. Kia ora, everyone. I'd like to open our meeting this morning with a karakia, and you'll find that on page 5, members. So, e noi tātou, tuia e runga, tuia e raro, tuia e roto, tuia e waho, tuia na kaiamahi o te kaunihira o Kirikiriroa, whaia i te iti kahurangi, kia u, kia mau, kia ita, haumie, huie, tai kie. Thank you for that. Wonderful way to open our meetings. To our agenda, and I have a full apology from Mayor Paula, a partial apology from Acting Mayor O'Leary on council business. Others who are in the room, and kia ora Kesh and Jeff online. Awesome to be able to still have that facility for you to participate in our full meeting. Kia ora everyone, so I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ewan. All those in favour? Declarations of interest, any from the room? There being none on Zoom either, thank you.
Can we just confirm the agenda? Sorry.
Oh, beg your pardon. Yes, we do need to confirm the agenda though. Kia ora. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Pike. All those in favour? Thank you. A bit late in the agenda for that. No public forum today, and that allows us to get straight into the business of the day. These are our usual reports, and the information within them will be of no surprise to members, which is excellent. I'll invite item number 5. I beg your pardon, a confirmation of our minutes for the 29th of February, moved by Councillor Wilson. You're busy today, Councillor Wilson, and seconded by Deputy Moko. All those in favour? Any matters needing attention in there? There being none? All those in favour? Against? Carried. Right, straight into the business of the day, and as I was saying, an awful lot of this report in our capital monitoring is information that's currently known. Ian, are you in the room somewhere?
Hello.
Kia ora. Come on down, take a seat. The meeting will be in your hands in just a moment. Members, can I just ask us to focus on the new stuff that's in the report, and that, of course, being those two instruction for service contracts in the agenda. It's an approach and an arrangement that has been previously approved by Council, and it offers several advantages that we've endorsed. Not the least being that we're able to just get on with the work when it's needed, as long as it fits the criteria. Detailed information that you'll find in each of those is provided in the report, and members will no doubt have some questions seeking clarity, but let's please keep our questions and our demeanour professional and respectful at all times. And let us focus on the new information within that report. Ian, I'm going to hand over to you to present your report and to make any further comments. Members, that you'll find that information beginning on page 11.
Thank you, Chair Maxine. Good morning, councillors. I'm presenting the Capital Monitoring Report today for the period ended 31st of March 2024, which means we're reporting on the 9-month financial result for the capital program for this current financial year. Just a couple of, you might notice in the room, a couple of absences. General or Executive Director Chris Allen is away at the moment, and our Capital Projects Director Kelly Stokes is also out in the room. And apparently I missed last meeting, and they made some comment that I left them last time, so they were going to leave me this time. So I think we're doing a bit of a tag team. Look, the total spend for the 9 months at 31st of March is $243 million, with revenue associated with that program of 42.8. That, I think one of the things I want to point to is just maybe the indicative, the comparative number against where we were 12 months ago with the capital program, where we were sitting here talking about a program of 198.7. You'll see that, you know, 198.7 was an impressive number, 243 is even better, and I think what that does is it just highlights that just the fact that over the last 24 months in particular, under the changes that have been made around capital delivery, that there's been a real effort now to lift that program up and ensure that what we are doing is we are delivering that capital program that we published in the LTP and the annual plan. So I think that's a really positive news story. In terms of the budget, you'll note that the budget in this iteration, as you'll just to confirm, the budget, we always come to you and we restate the budget based on known changes that have happened since the last Finance Committee report. In this iteration, we're saying that the capital budget, we're revising that down now to a total annual target of $342 million. We cover some of the main reasons for that. Two significant reasons are acknowledging deferrals that have been confirmed since the last committee, and they're on paragraph 33 within the report. We also make reference to other changes to the capital program, and they're in paragraph 39. I'll just cover a couple of those. One of them was we added some additional funding for some Rotokauri land that the council approved previously. We've also managed to reduce the budget in the Ruakura development area, which is the that significant development that council has undertaken in partnership with Tainui and central government. So that's been good that we've been able to bring that under budget. Now we can return some of those savings back to council. I do just reiterate an attachment 2 within the report, which I thought was quite handy. It just gives you that history. That attachment 2 just shows you how we moved from the approved annual plan budget at the beginning of the year through to the number we're reporting today. So that there's good visibility and awareness around that. Work in progress. Look, the number continues to be high. It really is. But I think what I'm starting to see now is I'm starting to see a positive downward trend in that number as we're moving forward. It's not that I think is a good news story, and I just want to reinforce that if you have a look within the report, you'll see that for the 9 months for this year, that staff have completed capitalisation work papers of circa $166 million, with a further $48 million actually completed, but just haven't quite gone through that final hurdle to get them out of the ledger. So, you know, that reflects a significant amount of work on staff right across the entire organisation, not just simply within the capital projects team. Next point is Housing Infrastructure Fund. I think it'd be fair to say, look, a bit of a milestone moment, a bit of a celebration that at the end of March we have now consumed the entire facility agreement, which is the $180.3 million that the government gave to us as an interest-free loan. So that's awesome, I think. And it doesn't take much to see if you drive out to Peacock and you see that bridge and all the pump stations and the roading network, just some of the great infrastructure that money has been able to afford. And of course, council will benefit for the next 10 years of that borrowing as being interest free. So I think that's great. And then the last thing is, you will note in this report a couple of additional approvals being requested around what we're calling the Building Works Panel contract. Just a little bit of a background on that. It is covered in the report, but look, this was a contract council had entered into on 23rd of August 2022. It was effectively we're setting up a panel with 3 contractors, Woodview, Mitchell and Downey. There was significant advantages to the organisation in doing that one in terms of the pricing we were given and the fact that it enabled work to happen at pace and take away some of those barriers to ensure the delivery of the capital program. Had an approved contract sum of $30.8 million, which is very much within the approved budget. The report also gave approval, delegated authority to the General Manager of Development, up to the approved contract sum. The report itself, there was no recommendation, but it's implicit within the report. It did talk about that if any individual project was to exceed a $2 million threshold, then staff would come back and seek approval from the committee or the council if it was going to go over that level, just to ensure that. So the report you'll see deals with 2 individual projects, one Steel Park toilets and the other one is the work at the Waikato Museum. But both of those are going to breach that 2 million threshold. So the report approval you'll see at the beginning of the report is just asking for approval to proceed with the award of those particular pieces of work. And I think I will leave it at that. Thank you very much. I'll take any questions.
Kia ora. And I see no questions on the board here. It seems unusual for our committee, but I beg your pardon. Councillor Atwitter.
Thank you, Chair Max. Ian, the agreements with Downey, Mitchell and Wood.
Yes.
Yeah. So I understand that by doing it that way, you're making some savings by reducing the likes of meetings and paperwork and stuff like that. What would you estimate the savings from managing the contracts this way?
It's a very awkward question, to be blunt with you. I mean, I can't quantify that. I mean, the advantage, clearly, on going to a panel is you do get the agility, you can move quicker, they are in a competitive environment. But I'm afraid I couldn't quantify at this stage what that would be. We would have to go back, maybe do a desktop exercise and try and do something, but it would be a very subjective analysis.
Right.
Councillor Biden.
So would you say it's worth expanding that to other areas of council operations because there's benefits?
I'd have to give you my personal opinion, yes. or well, maybe I'll give you a good alignment. I mean, at the moment, council has a professional services panel. Very much the same thing, which allows the market to put in, create a panel. It allows the organisation to then work with a little more agility and pace and in procuring some of those services. So yeah, I think we should always be considering those types of opportunities that gives us more agility, but it's always ensuring that we're going through due process, due diligence, yes. And we're getting the best price for the community and the ratepayer.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bidder. No other questions? All right, I'll put the motion then as it sits on page 11. Sorry, that was Councillor Sarah. Thank you. A debate. Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Yet another really comprehensive report, keeping us abreast of all of the progress that's happening in those really large projects of interest across our city, showcasing the real significant progress that's happening. In terms of the 2 matters of instruction for service, it seems like a great way to be able to get on with the work, as I mentioned in the preface to this paper. It gives our council the opportunity to find savings where it's possible through operational and other efficiencies across all those endeavours, and you know, that's a really good thing in these times where we want to be able to get on with the work with as least fuss as possible. Strategically crafted so that it allows us to do that, and that's helpful. Where there is the need to expand the scope or where exceeded predefined thresholds are in place, we get the opportunity to get some further clarity and transparency, and that's what's we've seen this morning in our meeting. I understand that approximately 80% of the projects that are coming through that $30 million budget are well within that $2 million threshold, and that's really great because it enables us to swiftly get on with the work and do that in a really effective manner. Streamlines the approach, and the benefits for all of us are quite clear. It also grants our staff the freedom and the assurance to be able to do that work and proceed with their tasks promptly. Colleagues, I believe this methodology really leads to a really productive outcome, and I'm fully in support of it. Kia ora. Sarah, was there anything that you wanted to add or say? Any other debate, colleagues? Let's put the motion then. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Carried unanimously.
Thank you. Colleagues, to the item number 7, our financial performance and strategy report, and welcome Tracy to the chair. Kia ora, Tracy. I'll hand the meeting over to you and for you to introduce your report and bring to us the key points.
Thank you, Chair Max. So good morning, everyone. So I'm here presenting to you today the year-to-date financial results for the end of March 2024. So from an accounting result, we're currently tracking behind budget by $14.5 million. So keeping in mind the accounting result is all of our revenue and all of our expenses. As I pointed out at the last committee meeting, the reason for that is mainly in that capital revenue space with that SURF funding. So that SURF funding is now gone from a revenue perspective. So that obviously reflects negatively in our accounting result, but from a cash flow perspective, the flip side of council putting in their cash, we've got a savings in that space to offset that. Our balancing the books result is also behind budget by $10.9 million. So again, no surprise to any of you, these are all, the variances are all about depreciation and interest at the moment in that space as well. With regards to our treasury position, so you would have noted in paragraphs 12 and 13, so for March we were non-compliant with what we call our counterparty credit limits. So there was a bit of a timing issue for us borrowing some money in advance of having to pay some back. So I made the decision to go with the bank that was the most favourable, but what that meant is I breached that counterparty covenant. Keeping in mind though that you had already just approved the investment and liability policy the month before that allowed that particular one to be a lot higher. So given that you were already had approved that, I decided to make that decision. So with regards to the end of year position by the end of June 2024, so you'll see in paragraph 19 we're forecasting our accounting result to be unfavourable by 29.1 million and our balancing the books to be unfavourable by 24.4. So at the last committee I brought those results for the first time back to you as far as what we were forecasting our June balance to be. So just to note the difference between that report and today, the main area again is in that capital revenue space, and we have some DCs that we're now forecasting to come in a lot lower than budget, and because we've just taken out new lending, our finance costs have just increased as well. So that's the difference between those two forecasting results. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm looking to the board. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Maxine. Morning, Tracy.
Morning.
Not good news in terms of the current financial position. Can I get your understanding or your gut feeling as to the likelihood of how likely is it that these DC revenue reductions are going to continue? Is this a sort of a blip, or do you think early indications are this is going to carry on?
So that's a really great question because I was just talking to Blair about that just before I popped up here. So you'll see, so we've obviously now forecasting that revenue down for here. When I come back to you on LTP, I'm about to do the same thing. So it is stretching out and it is going to make a difference in the LTP, and the team are literally in the middle of rerunning their model with obviously the changes and things like that to produce a forecast. But we are obviously already seeing it in this year, and we will be having to pick that up and make that change in the LTP as well.
Excellent. Well,
not really, but
not excellent at all.
Not excellent at all, but it is what it is.
So our starting point is going to look a lot worse than we had thought.
Correct.
Just in terms of the 10.9 balancing of the books, million variance, you're saying that's predominantly due to depreciation and interest rates. I had assumed that we would have started to have seen earlier trends in the last sort of 12 months that we may have been able to mitigate some of that. Is this a Treasury issue? Is it just that we've locked ourselves into these floating interest rates? Help me explain that more.
Yeah, so that's exactly it. So you'll remember we made the decision a few years ago with regards because of the water and what was happening with water, that we didn't want to overfix what we had, because obviously that debt was supposedly going to be going out to someone else. And it was a real balancing act on trying to figure out how much we should hold fixed and what would end up being released. Once that decision, obviously at the end of last year, came in that probably was no longer going to be the case, I've actually put more on fixed rates so that I can move that up. It is something that I asked our Treasury partners. In fact, we just had the meeting last week, and again, I'm like, can I fix some more? Can I fix some more? But they are still very much advising us not to. It's still uncertain. It's still too hard. And if you lock in some of that, it's, we'll end up paying for it later on. So it really is just a bit of a watching game at the moment. The reason why this starts, we just had to redo $95 million worth of lending that just switched over. So some of that obviously comes off those very favourable, nice 1% rates and switches back on to obviously what we've got at floating at the moment. So it's just that moving sort of thing. But I literally have a meeting with them every month to talk about those things, and is there anything different? And as far as even pushing and pulling, and when we're borrowing, what years they come off at as well. So so the whole 95 million is split into bits and kind of spread. So
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I've just got one further question, and it might not be an easy one to answer. Obviously, this all has ramifications to our starting point for the LTP.
correct?
And I wonder if you could remind us what the original starting point in terms of deficit was, and then now what that will be, and give me an insight as to the sort of, if we were to still go out with the idea of a 19.9 and 15.5 in the subsequent 4 years. I guess what I'm asking is, our starting point has now changed. So how much more rates would we have to charge to keep us financially where we were? I haven't articulated that particularly well.
Are you asking about debt, or are you asking about balancing the books?
I guess I'm asking about both, because the balancing of the books equation, I guess it's still going to be year 3. Our debt pressure will be even more heightened in year 2 of the LTP, I'm assuming, as a result of, but in
Year 1.
In year 1, okay.
Yep. So what happens this year definitely does have an effect on obviously what our closing balance is for this year and what our opening balance becomes for next year. So that's something that the team are doing right now behind the scenes, is re-looking at what we've already said that opening balance for that debt will be. So that does take into consideration the DCs, because that's cash in the door, and any other things that we are getting in. So at the moment, that's the piece of work that we're doing. And the interest rates, we will reassess that again, and I always tell you that I'll do that right up to the last minute, so that we lock and load the most current rates. As far as balancing the books this year and next year, they're quite separate. So remember, it finishes, so this year is what it is, and then obviously we start next year, we started afresh. However, what does affect it is, again, how much our balancing the books deficit is at the end of this year, because obviously if we're paying that out of debt, which a portion of it is, then obviously that flows through into that opening debt balance into next year. To answer your question about what those rates and what all of that looks like, no idea right now, to be perfectly honest. The team is doing a lot of work behind the scenes. We're working with the capital program, we're working with the DC program. As I just mentioned, we're working in our treasury space. I haven't put all of that together yet, so I genuinely don't know.
Thank you so much.
So, Councillor Ewan, basically Tracy's saying as we come back in deliberations through the 10-year plan, we'll be re-looking at all the underlying assumptions, including inflation, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll get all that over the next few weeks once the teams finalise the work. And as she said, we always try and do that up until the last moment, so we've got as up-to-date information as possible, notwithstanding the fact that we're also looking at the capital program as well.
Thanks, Madam Chair. If I could just ask a question of the CEO of the point. So I guess that the fact that you think you may have found an extra 180 odd million in capex savings, that potentially will help?
It will on a couple of parts of that.
On year 2?
Not necessarily.
No, not necessarily.
Or, okay. I thought it was right at the beginning and in the middle.
No, it's actually right in the middle.
Yeah.
So it depends
It's
on what
right
we're
in the middle?
pushing for, pulling
3 to
forward and
6.
pushing back, and the timing of all of that. So, and I don't know what that looks like yet.
Okay.
Thank you. Look, I appreciate these
Yeah,
questions,
very
but really that's a discussion for our long-term plan deliberations and for us to really work into it in that space. So thank you for raising it though, Councillor Wilson. It's entirely valid. Just before I go to Councillor Casey Cox, Councillor Wilson asked some questions with regard to fixing and our interest rates, etc. Can I just get some clarification around the waters piece with regard to any fixed loans that we may have? Is there the ability to transfer those into a new entity, or are we required to break, repay, and that entity restart?
To be honest, it really depends now on what that entity or what that is. So we were quite restricted based on the legislation that they had coming through, you know, for the last 2 or 3 years, and it was quite prescriptive. And I don't know if you remember me talking, when the waters thing first came out, they said, yes, we'd take all of your fixed lending and everything would go with it, et cetera,
Yes.
et cetera. And then about halfway through, they changed their minds and they said, oh, actually, no, you need to keep it. And you need to keep all of the hedging per se, but we'll take your debt and we'll take your assets. So it switched it around. And at that point, that was when we decided that we weren't going to fix anything else until we were certain of what that looked like.
And there's no further clarity at this point about how that debt might be treated?
No.
Okay,
So-
thank you. And should we be required to break it, would there be penalties involved in doing that?
Again, it depends, and that's why we stagger the years and stagger that hedging and things like that. So we'd have to look at it all and figure out what you could release or what you just let carry on, because it wouldn't be worth, you know, breaking and things like that. So if you think it's very similar to just breaking a fixed mortgage. You know, they penalise you for that. You still have to pay the same amount of interest, so you're kind of no better off in the long run. So it's very similar to that sort of thing. So again, you know, what those entities look like, they might be okay with it. If LGFA get involved, it might work for that. So there's just too many unknowns at the moment.
And I think to add to what Tracy said, the difference is that we're in control now. So we get to decide what the entity is. We get to decide what how we'll treat our debt. So we won't be forced to break fixed lending arrangements. It'll be a decision of council whether or not, and I can't see that needing to happen.
No, thank you. Thanks, Tracy, and excellent work working with our Treasury partners.
I wonder, just to Chair, just to close out that question you raised, you might recall there are 2 pieces of legislation foreshadowed for waters, one imminently and one towards the end of the year. That latter piece of legislation is intended to outline any enabling provisions that may relate to new entities or new structures, which could include the things you've talked about, could include a whole raft of things such as tax status of entities, bylaw settings. So very good questions, but we just simply don't know what that bill will say yet.
Okay, time will tell. Councillor Casey Cox.
Hi. Thanks, Tracy. Just following on from Councillor Ewan's questions about DCs, I just, in terms of our proposal to increase DCs quite significantly, I understand there might be a bit of a surge of applications, but that won't, or resource consent applications, but that won't notably affect our projections around DC revenue.
No, so that's the piece of work, so you had a briefing on that last week.
Yeah.
So that's the piece of work that Greg and the team are looking at, because obviously there's two parts to it. There's obviously the pricing that the new DCs will go up, and then there's the timing of when we put that into play and what that looks like. So that's why his team are busy at the moment trying to figure out, I guess, where that sweet spot is as to that timing and what comes in and picks up at what pricing, because there's obviously quite a big difference as well.
Yeah.
So that's what they're doing at the moment, and that's why in some of the modelling that I've seen so far, it's probably a lot less now but a lot higher later in the later years, because that's when the new DC policy obviously then starts kicking in full.
Okay.
So again, it's more of a timing issue at the moment for their team just to figure that out.
Okay.
And as you know, it's the how much do you put it up and then how much the volume versus.
It's referred to as 224C, effectively when the subdivision or section is titled predominantly. So the surge that you're referring to at the moment is quite correct. There is more inquiries as people are looking to ideally lodge consent applications this side of 30th of June. But that development could occur in the forthcoming number of years. So
Right.
those consents remain valid for a number of years. So.
Okay, thank you.
But they will definitely be factored into the modelling that Greg is working on right now.
Thank you. That's all of your questions, Councillor Casey Cox?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Bidder.
Thank you, Chair Max. Tracy, so just confirming that the bulk of DCs so rather than our balancing the books being affected directly.
Not quite. So DCs is cash, so it doesn't get included in our debt to revenue calculation per se. It's not included as part of that revenue, but by default, because it's cash in the door, it gets picked up as part of the debt. So obviously it comes in and it pays down our debt, which is what it's supposed to do.
Right.
We take a portion of that, so at the moment that's 35%, and we bring that back in as part of our balancing the books.
Right.
Now, the reason for that is if you think about the interest costs that we pay, the interest cost is across of our whole debt, regardless of where it's been paid out to operationally, or obviously for that debt, and it also includes the interest portion. So we offset some of that interest portion into our balancing the books, because that's operationally where we hold it. Now, there's a different calculation for what we as accountants do, and then obviously what the DC model does and things like that. But essentially what it's saying is we're picking it up based on projects that have already happened and projects that are in the future, and we model it and come up with a calculation. So it's something that we've chosen to do. We did it, we started in the 2018 LTP, just to show a true reflection. It was also at that time, at the time, DCs in full was being included as revenue. So that was when we decided to take that out, but just leave a portion effectively to cover your interest costs.
Yeah, so that's a good way of doing it. So forecasting, so we didn't get the forecast right last time. Getting the forecast right for the next year and for the rest of the 10-year plan. Are we getting feedback from the market as part of working out these forecasts?
For DCs or for everything else?
For DCs.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a bleak question.
So number one, yes, we are, but ultimately any forecast will be wrong. It is a forecast by its very nature, but certainly Greg and the team are using the most up-to-date information. And certainly, as you say, the market has provided a lot of feedback in terms of level of development at the moment, feasibility, and naturally, obviously, the level of DC levies is part of that equation as well. Hence the clarification that DCs will be taken at the time that the consent is lodged, subject to the Section 88 test, is providing quite a lot of interest at the moment as people look to lodge consents this side of 30th of June. Yeah. But certainly, Councillor Bidder, we will use our best efforts and obviously be conservative in forecasts, but ultimately it's a forecast, and we will need to, through this committee, bring regular updates on that, and obviously through the annual planning process also look at the DC revenue for subsequent years in the budget.
Yeah. And what proportion of DCs is commercial versus residential? What's the split?
I don't have that breakdown, I'm sorry.
And finally, so with the modelling of higher DCs, is that predicting an impact on the number of projects that go ahead? Are we seeing a decline?
That is part of the calculation that the team are looking at, that there is a linkage between price and demand. Again, that assumption will be based on a range of inputs, but only time will tell as to how accurate that is. But certainly, I think your question is around, is there a tipping point where a price starts to have a very negative impact on demand? And the answer is there is. And I think the submissions are providing some of that feedback and guidance as well. So the clarification from the workshop last week has probably provided some immediate assistance, but undoubtedly over time the levies are going to rise, and the balance is going to be, what does that mean in terms of demand uptake in terms of development? I don't know if that answers your question. But
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Bidder. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Tracy, I just had two questions. Good morning, firstly, and thank you for the report. One is in regard to paragraph 40. Oh, sorry, no, hold on. Paragraph 41. Administration expenses, 1.1 million. And I was interested in the savings there. So it says reduce fuel costs due to changes within fleet management and electric vehicles. I guess, I'm not sure, it may be a difficult question for you to answer, it may have to take it offline, but do you know how it will impact ongoing operating costs if we don't go ahead with what was in the LTP around the charging for electric vehicles? Because it seems here, I guess I'm just asking because it seems like it's resulting in a favourable saving operationally.
Probably take it offline,
Yep.
but yes, there are savings baked into the LTP for reducing the size of our fleet, introducing some EVs where it makes sense, and also shifting the way we travel around using other modes of transport, car share, e-bikes, etc. So there is an aggressive savings ask already in the LTP, so but we can have a conversation offline.
Yeah, okay, thank you, I'll take that offline. Another question was just in regard to personnel costs, and then later, on paragraph 39, and it notes then this is the saving, well, I won't call it a saving, but it's less than budget, but then says it's partially offset by the cost of external contractors filling staff roles. And I just wanted to understand, I guess, with all of the restructuring and the proposals that have been put forward, the risk that we end up with an increased reliance on contractors and what impact that has on costs and other things.
I was going to say Lance or David.
So it's mission critical roles. So e.g. delivering a capital program, and we've been through major reorganisation over the past 7 months, and making sure that we can finish programs. So I think you'll find that's probably more of an interim position rather than an ongoing position.
Yeah, and quite often, Lance, it would be when we have vacancies that we can't fill as well. So it's just getting, so it's a whole mishmash of causes.
Right, thank you.
Good. Any further questions? Councillor Pike.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Tracy, for your work on this. I know it's not easy and never ends. Just noting on page 54, paragraph 43, around depreciation and the $10 million variance there, 8 million of which were due to transport, parks and garden improvements. Can you just explain a bit more about why they were so unfavourable in this area?
Yes, sure. So when we did the annual plan last year, and obviously we're putting together the budget for what we thought that was going to be this year, we took a percentage of what we thought that revaluation for those particular areas was going to be, and obviously added that into the budget. As you can imagine, the timing of when we were doing that and putting that into lock and load into the annual plan, but the actual physical completion of the revaluation itself was after the fact. So those valuations came back a lot higher than what we had already included in the budget, and unfortunately it was too late to go back and redo the budget for those. So as soon as we found that out, I came to council and informed them that basically for the whole year you're going to be over budget purely because of those two things. So it is about timing. We are trying now to do some of the revaluations in April instead, rather than leaving it up to sort of that June. But again, it's just it's the workflow and trying to get it all done. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my second question was on timing, so you've answered that too. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That being the end of questions, Councillor Ewan's moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Casey Cox. We'll move to debate. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I have to appreciate the staff providing the details. I may not agree with, I'm often unhappy with what I'm being told, but I support and appreciate the data that I'm being provided. I think this is, again, a great reminder to us as we go into our LTP of the challenges we have ahead of us, and they are significant. Basically, what we have told the community is our financial position leading into the LTP has changed yet again, and our position is worse. Our DC revenue is slowing up, while contemporaneously we're spending huge amounts of money in the LTP on CapEx that, in theory, will enable future growth that we know is slowing up. Our balancing of the book equation is getting worse, which simply means our ability to actually balance our books so that we're not borrowing for everyday expenses is getting more challenging. So what's the lessons here is if you thought that you knew what our starting position for the LTP was, you're wrong. It's got worse. I think we're going to come under a lot of pressure at our hearings about people wanting us to spend more, people wanting us to spend less. I think we're going to get to the point where this council is going to have to make a significant change in our direction, our scale, and our appetite for funding capital growth in light of some market indications that says our likely revenue is slowing down. Now, it's a timing issue, but we've already spent a lot of money, and the early indications is the revenue's slowing up.
Thank you for winding up so quickly. To the bell. Councillor Casey Cox, did you want to? No. Councillor Bitter.
Chair Max, I'll begin with a thank you to Tracy. Bad news is good if you get it early enough to actually make changes to make a difference. So I really appreciate no fudging, hiding of the figures, telling us straight. That's good to know.
Point of order, Chair. 20.4, or hold on, I think there could be multiple.
Yeah. I will restart my time at 1 minute 50 seconds.
Or, okay, point of order, sorry, I need help to find the number, but I think that it was either disrespectful or a misleading comment.
Could you explain how that was disrespectful?
what we just do is ask you to rephrase.
Point
those
of order.
comments. Thank you.
Sarah's point of order was disrespectful.
No, I think she's looking to be able to make sure that we've got accurate information into the chamber, and that
Could you
I'm
advise
asking you
what
if you
was
could-
inaccurate?
Councillor Sarah? Look, that's my ruling, and I think I'll stay with that. Just
Your
ask
ruling
you
is not
to-
accepted.
I'll just ask you to rephrase that if you could, and then you can start your debate, and we can finish this item.
Madam Chair, proceed your question. As an elected member, I'm not sure exactly which point of order has been raised. So could the point of order...
Councillor Sarah raised a point of disrespectful under
So which clause?
26.2.
26.2?
Around language, and I'm upholding that and asking.
D, and I also believe that 20.4 is relevant.
I didn't. Okay. So I'm allowing you to restart your debate, and you'll have, I think we'll allow you the full 2 minutes.
Right.
Thank you.
I will begin by thanking Tracy for giving us the bad news, because it is good to know the bad news so that we can make changes, and that she did not fudge or distort, sanitise any figures.
Respectful to staff.
Point of order, how is that disrespectful?
No, she's got a, Chair's got a rule first.
Yeah, I don't believe using the word fudge is respectful enough to our
I
staff.
said that it was not fudged.
And so I would ask you not to use that phrase, if you would, and then we can complete the debate. You can get your points across as you might want to, and we can vote on this item, if you would.
No.
Okay, thank you. You choosing not to complete your debate? Thank you. Do we have any other speakers?
My freedom of speech is being blocked. That is a breach of my human rights.
Excuse me, Andrew, I think that it's not the case at all, and ask you to just refrain, if you would. Thank you.
My
No,
freedom
no,
of
excuse
speech
me.
is being blocked. That is a breach of my...
The fact that it's not always the news that we're wanting. On the positive side, the report shows that there's areas where we're doing well. Income from our operation is higher than it's been expected from subsidies and grants. We're also managing our money wisely, which is earning us more interest. We're being careful about our spending on staff and other expenses. However, the report also shows some problems and changes to interest rates and depreciation, which affects us negatively. These issues make us worry about our financial viability. But what's more also is that forecast figures in our debt to revenue, our net debt, and balancing the books paint a sobering picture, indicating the need for the strategic interventions that we've been discussing already in our long-term plan, and also in our call for government to support councils. One easy measure for that could be in the material difference that it would make if government returned to us the GST on our rates. That's around $40 million, give or take a couple, and it would allow us to invest in what is needed. I also join with my colleagues in thanking Tracy and your team once again for providing us with such up-to-date financial information. With that, we have timely data that we can effectively monitor our progress, and in a no surprises way. So thank you very much, Tracy and team. Kia ora. Right a reply, Councillor Wilson.
I have my light on. Thank you, Chair.
Firstly, I want to thank staff for the comprehensive report. As other elected members have said, it is not happy news. It puts us in a more challenging position for the LTP, and it shows that this is a fast-changing environment that we're working in. And even after we sign off the LTP, things will continue to change. And actually, that's where this committee will be important in allowing us to continue to respond if the financial situation continues to throw up challenges. In terms of I just want to also comment on GST on rates. It would also be fantastic to have GST paid on Crown property, which would bring in another 15 million approximately. And I think that, it's about time that they actually pay their way and pay development contributions as well. Finally, I do want to say that I think it's the finance staff put a huge amount of work into ensuring that they bring all information possible, and that this information is always transparent and it's always as up to date as they can possibly make it. And I believe that the comments made previously had an implication that it implied that that may not be the case, that there would be a possibility that that wouldn't be the case. And I found that disrespectful. I think that our staff do amazing work to ensure that we get transparent information, and it's really, and as an elected member, I've become increasingly concerned about some of the behaviour towards staff who work incredibly hard and under extreme amount of pressure at the moment, particularly with restructuring. And so from here on, I'm going to take a low tolerance of that.
Now, right of reply. I beg your pardon. Oh my goodness, I'm having trouble keeping up with all of you people. Thank you.
Look, thank you.
Acting Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to support Councillor Thompson's debate points, all of them. It is really, it's a tough financial time that we're in, but we are served extremely well by dedicated, I'd say a bunch of accountants, but you're so much more than that. And I put my utmost faith and confidence in you and in this space operate from a high trust model. I heard what Councillor Wilson said, and he's absolutely right in terms of this, the LTP and what we saw going into it. Way back at the start of last year is vastly changed, and it is a fast-moving beast. I am heartened, however, I'm almost 2/3 of the way through my LTP submissions, and you know me, it's dogma for me. I have to read every single one. So that was my Saturday night, yay, go Ange. Party. But in actual fact, there are very few asks in the submissions, in the nearly 3,000 submissions, very few. And I don't think I've been through an LTP where people have really, sadly, understood the situation that the city is in with our finances. Very, very few asks. So, we've done a great job with that. But also want to echo Councillor Thompson and yourself, Madam Chair. The picture would look significantly different, and we need to keep saying it if the government gave us our GST back, paid DCs, you're right, paid GST and pay rates on property, significant difference. So we can only just keep talking about that. But thank you, staff, for a good report. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take just a second to make sure nobody else pops up on the board before offering you your right of reply. Councillor Wilson.
Madam Chair. I can't help but feel that we may not have yet got to the point as elected members where we are understanding the seriousness of our predicament. I'm still hearing some narratives about if the financial conditions continue to be challenging. Every economist is telling us that the next few years is going to be incredibly difficult. our own clear data is beginning to see reductions of revenue, escalating costs. We do not need any more information about are we in financial difficulty. The answer is yes. I am mindful that some elected members start feeling very concerned, particularly with any reference to staff. And I understand that. But I am also mindful that as governors, we have to make some really tough decisions about the size of our organisation and our scale. And I'm just mindful that some may be trying to position themselves to not want to take on that responsibility of trying to right-size the organisation and try to say this is just a momentary blip financially. We have had this headwind for a couple of years. The indications are it's going to get worse. We've got to start making some serious decisions here. Today has just told us that where we thought we were is even worse. That means as governors, we've got to make even more serious reviews of our size, scale, and intentions.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you, colleagues. And now we're inviting our guest, Andrew Mickle, on behalf of LGFA, to present his report, half-yearly report and statement of intent. Kia ora and welcome, Andrew. The meeting is yours, and invite you. Colleagues, you will have seen a late addition to the report. Right at the very back, you'll see Andrew's PowerPoint presentation. Andrew, if you could take us through that, and I'll hand the meeting to you. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thanks for the opportunity to present to you today. I don't intend to go through all the slides. I'll just make a few comments and then sort of perhaps spend 5 minutes and then open it up to questions. So I'll just share the presentation. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that. The recent developments, I just want to touch on two things. Our LGFA's lending for the 9 months to March 24 is close to 4 billion, and we did another billion of lending in April. So this financial year, LGFA will be lending around $6 billion to the sector. And the key observation is when you compare it to 3 years ago, that's almost double the amount of borrowing that the sector was doing. The second point I wanted to make is that in the past 12 months, LGFA has begun issuing bonds into the Australian debt market. So once we got to around $20 billion of issuance in New Zealand, we've got to the point where we've really outgrown the capacity of the New Zealand financial markets to provide more money. So the New Zealand banks, the New Zealand KiwiSaver funds already have a lot of LGFA bonds. And so to get that incremental growth, around half our issuance in the past 9 months has been into the Australian market. And there's capacity there to sort of keep doing that. The next page, just to show you again, we've got over $20 billion of lending, and we're doing that on 10 staff. We have the shareholders council and also the board over the top of that. Our financial sort of history. So again, it's not LGFA's primary goal to grow its operating profit. the things we focus on is certainty of financing to the sector is our number one objective. The bottom left-hand graph, you can just see the assets sort of going up as sector debt keeps increasing. The financial results, the only thing I wanted to sort of touch on here is the operating expenses. That's the only thing we didn't meet our target. That's because when we issued in Australian dollars, we have to pay what's called an approved issuer levy tax. So that was unbudgeted because we didn't realise we were going to issue in Australian dollars this year. But the AIL tax is making up around 13% of our total operating expenses. So it's going to be about $1 million of expenses this year that we just didn't budget, but we simply had to go to Australia to issue the debt. In terms of the draft statement of intent, there really isn't too many changes from the past, from the previous year's statement of intent, other than the amount of LGFA lending is going to be higher. It's a really challenging time to really put together what the sector demand for debt is going to be, because we're still going through this discussions about what the shape of the water reforms and things is going to look like. So we'll have a little bit more clarity in the next couple of months. So hopefully when we put out the final sort of SOI. But really the core objectives, there really are no changes from the previous sort of years. I wanted just to touch on water reforms. So LGFA is more than happy to come and speak to a council workshop on what's sort of happening there. You would have seen the announcement with Auckland and Watercare, what they are doing. We think there's sort of unique circumstances in Auckland, so you're not necessarily going to see the same sort of model rolled out. But as we stand at the moment, LGFA has 5 CCOs that it lends to that are members of LGFA. We have another 2 that are joining, so we'll have 7 CCOs. So as we stand at the moment, there's no reason LGFA is not able to lend to a water CCO or a multiply owned water CCO. That water CCO could have very different levels of covenants than what councils sort of have at the moment, which would allow more capex to be done under that space. And it would certainly, for the majority of councils with water assets, it would free up financial headroom under their balance sheet. So happy to answer any questions on the sort of water issue, or come and do another session on that. And finally, just sustainability. So again, we've done a lot in this space over the past 12 months, and we're looking to further increase our activity in that space. So again, that's a very important part of what LGFA is focused on. So I'll finish there and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. And look, thank you for your offer to come and talk us through some of the Waters funding challenges. I'm absolutely certain that our members will be interested in that conversation and helping us to make great decisions. So we'll work with you to find suitable times, etc. I do have questions on the board for you. First of those is from Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Unsurprisingly, hello, Andrew. Firstly, good morning, and thanks for your presentation. Unsurprisingly, I've got a question around Three Waters. I'm interested in I guess the thinking that's been done to date on lending for Waters. If we were to either borrow, I guess have altered covenants for Waters as a council or for a CCO, would that have more favourable rates than what Watercare is looking at with its, I guess, being a fully independent, separated entity and borrowing independently by the looks of it?
So firstly, I just want to point out that LGFA has a strategy session with the Shareholders Council. So we're going to be looking at a lot of the strategic issues around what's happening in the water space, what LGFA can do there, and also touch on the issues of covenants for growth councils and dealing with that issue as how do the growth councils finance their growth. So and also we've got a lot of work that we're doing with the rating agencies, with Treasury, with DIA in the space at the moment. So it's sort of quite fluid, and as there's more announcements from the government over the next few months, you know, we're going to have we can probably be a lot more specific. In the case of Watercare, they've set up a model, it's 100% owned, it's two waters, but there's going to be complete balance sheet separation. So that's probably different than just balance sheet separation. So the council will be prohibited from providing financial support. The standalone credit rating of Watercare is likely to be around BBB minus. They might get some enhancements, so even though the government are saying they're not going to guarantee it, S&P probably will view that the government may step in as a last resort, but they will have to finance debt in their own name. So the cost of debt as a BBB entity is going to be a lot higher than what Auckland Council can borrow at as a AA rated council or from LGFA. LGFA won't be able to lend to it because Watercare is not going to be supported from the council. So it will be a political decision from councils as to whether they want to support their water CCO. There's strong benefits for doing that in terms of it means water charges could be less, or water, you know, if you're spending less on interest costs, that money can go into, you know, doing more capex or having lower water charges. So there's some benefits. The council could be paid a guarantee fee, so there's some upsides for the council as well. But ultimately, it will come down to each council as to what decisions they want to make. It's a bit of a long answer, and I could speak a bit more on the pros and cons, but again, happy to come and speak to you in more detail on that.
If I can just add to Andrew's answer, so that Shareholders Council meeting with the board is tomorrow, and so I'll be attending that. I'm right across the Waters Working Group in terms of the different things that could add value to the way council might choose to set up waters. So in simplistic forms, leaving the two bills aside in terms of how the government might enable CCOs to be a little different under a water entity, simplistic terms is that we could set up a CCO with waters if we chose to, and LGFA might choose to, with greater backing, lift the debt covenant of that water CCO separately from council. So it sounds like there's a lot of complex models that we could set up, but there's also some simple things that we can do. So what we're trying to do is understand all of those options and then bring that to council.
Thank you. And a final question, David, I assume that won't all become clear before the LTP is signed off.
No.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah. That's the last of your questions. Councillor Casey Cox.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for your presentation. Just a question, you say in your report that you're meeting with all the borrowers quite regularly. I guess I just wondered what you're hearing from everybody in terms of debt headroom and debt to revenue ratios in particular. Like what kind of things are being said to you, I guess?
Yes, I mean, I've met with a lot of councils over the past few months. It's a really challenging time for the sector, and the issues you were discussing before are just, the themes are just so common. I mean, some councils are in an even more challenging position because they have chosen not to fund their water depreciation over the past few years, and that's now going to hurt them because it's now not transitioning to a water CCO as they had hoped. It's really challenging, you know, for councils to convey to ratepayers the reasons for the increases in rates, given a lot of it's going to fund depreciation, higher interest costs, insurance costs. So, you know, it's all these things you can't see. So, you know, trying to justify high rate increases when people can't see what they're getting for it is really sort of challenging. But there's a lot of challenges sitting on the horizon. So, you know, for councils not balancing their budgets, it's going to be challenging enough without sort of running, you know, sustained deficits over you know, coming years. So we appreciate, you know, the challenges around affordability. There's no easy answers to a lot of this.
Anything further, Councillor Casey Cox?
Just a question around the climate action loans. I understand that our council's had a conversation, we don't meet the criteria. I guess my question in relation to those is, from your perspective, wouldn't it make sense to provide loans to councils who aren't meeting their climate targets? Because obviously they need the help to get there. Your criteria seems to support the ones that are doing better. So I'm just interested in that. Got a comment?
Yeah, so we've got the two categories of loans. So we've got the sustainable sort of loans. So that's for individual sort of projects. So we're happy to work with you in that space. It's a lot of the water assets would all fall into that space, but unfortunately, given the uncertainty over the past few years, it's just been too hard to do anything there. In terms of the climate action loans, that's set up for councils that have emissions reduction plans. So I take your point that, you know, there are councils that, you know, especially Auckland's and things that have very large resources that they can put into this that are, you know, far more sort of advanced. I mean, it's a global debate, the point you've raised about, you know, is it just rewarding all the people with sort of green and sustainable things, or is it about sort of lending to coal companies and helping them to transition? So again, you know, it is, I take your point and I'll give that feedback to our head of sustainability.
Thank you. And just, I guess it's a bit of confusion in your report. At one point it says it was 1.2 billion for those loans, and then somewhere else it says 1.2 million. So I just wondered which one is it? In terms of the climate action loans, yeah. Is it 1.2 billion?
It's 1.2 billion, yeah.
It is 1.2 billion. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Casey Cox. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks for your presentation, Andrew. I just wanted one bit of clarity. On one hand, I've understood NZLGFA can lend to CCOs, but on the other hand, you've said you can't to Watercare. Could you just explain again why exactly you can't lend to Watercare? Because I'm not 100% sure I got that.
Right. So LGFA got shareholders to approve changes in 2020, so LGFA could lend to CCOs. But that's on the provision that councils either provide a guarantee or uncalled capital in the case of a CCTO. So councils have to provide financial support to the CCO for LGFA to lend to it.
Okay, thank you.
So Watercare has asked the government to pass legislation that prohibits Auckland Council from providing any form of financial support to Watercare.
Okay, thank you.
So LGFA cannot lend to Watercare under what's been proposed.
Right.
Not without going back to shareholders, or to all council members, who would need all 77 council members to change the way we lend if we wanted to do that. And we think that would be a very high bar to reach, because some councils wouldn't be happy for LGFA to lend to, you know, BBB rated entities without council support. That would be a huge change in our risk profile.
So thank you. So just for clarity though, if Hamilton City Council decided to create a waters entity CCO, and we did so on the basis that we could decouple the new entity's debt off our balance sheet, as long as council then provided a guarantee ultimately, you would lend. And I just want to make sure us providing that guarantee doesn't run head to head with the fact that we've decoupled the assets off the council balance sheet. Do you see what I'm saying?
You've got that correct. So LGFA would lend to the Hamilton Water CCO, and that lending wouldn't restrict what the council was able to do on its own balance sheet. So the council would still be able to borrow 280% debt to revenue for its own purposes.
Thank you. My final question was on that point, debt to revenue. There seems to be some discussion that it may be time for the sector to lift the debt to revenue levels to give us more ability. Is there not a counter view that says actually, rather than trying to just borrow our way out of this financial challenging position, we should implement more financial disciplines and live within our means? And so that's a general question, and maybe second to that question is, if you believe that we should be able to increase our debt to revenue, what quantum, what would you change it to, and why?
Okay, so there's firstly there's a discussion on that tomorrow, so David can probably give you an update, but just a few general comments. I mean, we've given some thought to this. We've discussed it with the Infrastructure Commission. So one of the observations they made is that they do think some growth councils should be able to borrow more, because it's important to be able to invest in the infrastructure, and growth often pays for itself, or at least, pays part of costs. So it's quite different than saying to a council, you can build a new stadium, because that debt, isn't going to be revenue generating, as opposed to that issue to growth. So it's and again, I don't want to say what the LGFA board and LGFA shareholders will ultimately decide, because no decision's been made. But my inclination is we're a little bit more open to the idea of maybe doing some bespoke lending above the current covenant levels, specifically for growth, but maybe not for other purposes. But no decision's been made, so but that's sort of, I think, perhaps where it's heading.
So if I can give you an associated lens, but different lens. Thanks, Andrew. So not all LGFA shareholders are interested in lifting the covenant, because many of them don't borrow and are nowhere near the current limits. So this is a growth council issue. So the conversations with the LGFA board through the shareholders council has been that we wouldn't support a general lift of covenants, because we understand the nervousness of those other shareholders. But we would like to tease out opportunities for growth councils that might be separate. The second thing is the water CCO itself, if we set one up, could have a much higher debt to revenue. Let's just say 500, which seems to be touted out a lot around the conversations. And saying that, that would provide council with an opportunity to access more debt, but the financial prudence you're talking about separately needs to be a constraint that council puts on itself in terms of whether or not it accesses that debt. But currently we don't have an opportunity to access any debt, which is one of the reasons why our rates are at the current rate for the first year of the long-term plan, is that we simply just don't have enough revenue.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Councillor Wilson, that's the end of your questions? Thank you. And I see no further questions. Thank you, Andrew, for your presentation and for your frank conversations with us. I'll go to the meeting for a mover. Councillor Wilson, a seconder. Councillor Deputy Chair Moko. And debate. Councillor Wilson, is there anything you wanted to add? Comments to make?
Very briefly, thanks, Madam Chair. I found the report very helpful. I found it very insightful. I must confess I am very cautious when it comes to changing the debt to revenue ratios, even for growth councils, particularly in light of what we've heard today, that some of our growth revenue is slowing down. I disagree slightly with Andrew. Well, actually, maybe I don't disagree, because he did clarify his position when he said growth pays for growth. He followed it up with partly, and it's the partly that I would highlight, because we all know, if we're being honest, growth doesn't pay for growth. If we're lucky, we think we can get 80% or maybe 85% on a good day with tailwind. That means the poor ratepayer is picking up the balance. And so I'm very cautious of the mantra, we can borrow our way out of this challenge. And I'm quietly confident that some of the other shareholding councils will say, not on your life. We have to come up with something cleverer than simply borrowing our way out of this problem. Having said this, maybe under some circumstances, a small adjustment may be appropriate, but I would want some really clever minds around the table to land on what that figure is. But I would, and we've got some very clever minds around the table, and so hopefully we'll land on something. But yeah, I'd just be really cautious. I think we've just got to be more fiscally sensible in how we manage the timing of this infrastructure spend.
Thank you. Councillor Moko, any comments from you? No? Anyone else? No? Okay. Look, thanks, colleagues, for your questions to LGFA. It shows a real engagement in the situation that we find ourselves and the challenges that change in waters brings us. I'm really heartened by the offer from Andrew to give us more information and carry on these discussions that have happened and begun here. It really shows that we are understanding the challenges that Councillor Wilson presents in his debate. I completely understand the conflict that we have as a growth council with the demand that we have to match and balance with the affordability of that. We need frameworks that will give us the opportunity to explore what our options are, and I think at this stage that's what we're asking, and I welcome the opportunity to look further into it. Colleagues, let's put that to the vote. All those, Councillor Wilson, did you want to write a reply? No? Okay, let's take that to the vote then. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against?
Carried unanimously.
Thank you, and thank you, Andrew. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Kia ora.
Thank you. Kia ora.
Let's, as we come up to 11 o'clock, it's meeting our timeframes perfectly. So a resolution to exclude the public, I will move. Councillor Moko second. All those in favour? Aye. And now let's take a short morning tea. We do say 10 minutes, so let's see if we can keep it to that. We've got some business that we need to discuss this afternoon, so the sooner we can begin that, the better, frankly. and we've got a couple of matters in the public excluded, so that should have us well and truly on a good trajectory for this afternoon's discussions. Kia ora.